What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sector for Nerds, and welcome to another episode of Star Wars The Clone Wars Retro Discussions. Today we're going to be chatting about Season 1, Episode 11, Dooku Captured. I know last week we didn't have an episode. I was on vacation. Technically, I'm recording this episode before I go on vacation, but that's neither here nor there. Hopefully for everybody that needed a chance to catch up on all the latest episodes, you had the chance to do that. If you're watching this late in the future, then this doesn't affect you. But as always, you guys, make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you guys could head over to Top 10 Character Moments, subscribe there as well. Also greatly appreciated. This episode was directed by Jesse Ye and written by Julie Siege. The cookie for this episode: the winding path to peace is always a worthy one, regardless of how many turns it takes. Intro guy, your turn. Manhunt! After a long and perilous search, the Jedi have finally tracked down Separatist leader Count Dooku. During a heroic attempt to capture the Count, Anakin Skywalker has gone missing. Having lost contact with Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi heads towards his friend's last known location, a lone Separatist frigate in the far reaches of the Outer Rim. As always, thank you, intro guy. But yeah, this is like our first big episode about Count Dooku in the Clone Wars. Like, we've seen him around in other episodes. His presence has been very much felt since the beginning of this show, but I feel like since the movie, we haven't really gotten to see like as much of him. And this episode, he was like our main villain. There were two different Star Wars references at the start of this episode, and that's when Obi-Wan, he goes onto the Separatist frigate. He has like that crazy spacesuit on, and then he goes inside the ship, he opens up a prison cell, he's like, "Oh, you're not the prisoners I'm looking for." A reference to A New Hope when Ben Kenobi says, "These aren't the droids you're looking for." And then when he finally gets to Anakin, Anakin's like, "Oh, it's you," which is the same thing that Obi-Wan says to him in Revenge of the Sith. And I love the bickering back and forth between them at the start too. Like, how can I become a Jedi Master if I'm always getting caught? And Obi-Wan's like, "At least you're a master at getting caught."
When you're a Jedi Master, you can make the plan.
That's just it. How can I become a Jedi Master if I'm always getting caught?
At least you're a master at getting caught.
But then we get to Dooku. They confront Dooku.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, I thought I sensed an unpleasant disturbance in the Force. I see you freed young Skywalker. Where might he be if you weren't always around to rescue him?
He uses like this trap door to make his getaway. Anakin follows him. Dooku like kind of covers his tracks because he's using Force lighting, and Anakin's like, "Oh, I can't see, where'd he go?" And then there's like two different ways that he could have fallen down. It's like, oh, well, great, which one is it? They chase after Dooku. And by the way, the music during this scene as well, like, it's one of my favorite themes in the Clone Wars. I love it. But one of the big things that this episode does as well, aside from just like being about Dooku, it also introduces us to a brand new character called Hondo Ohnaka. Because what happens is Dooku traps the Jedi in a cave when they both crash down on that one planet, right? I think it's called Vancor. Dooku takes Anakin's lightsaber because he sees it laying on the ground, and he like collapses the cave so Obi-Wan and Anakin are trapped in it. But then Dooku's like, "All right, I'm gonna go back to my ship," and then there's just a freaking UFO there.
Well, what do we have here?
Who are you?
More importantly, my friend, who are you?
Your Solar Sailor is a pretty rare ship, very expensive. My best attempt at Hondo impression. And then being the nice, friendly pirate that Hondo seems to be, he's like, "Let me offer you transportation to Florum. It's the closest civilized system." But then again, I guess it depends on your definition of civilized. But then they get to Florum, right? And you think like, oh, all these pirates are here to visit Dooku, give Dooku a nice warm welcome. Yeah, that's not what's going on. Because Hondo ends up outsmarting him. He takes the lightsabers. Dooku goes to reach for the lightsabers, and he's like, "Oh, I got none." Oh, because Hondo has them. And Dooku's like, "Oh, I'm more powerful than any Jedi. You're dealing with a Sith Lord right now." And Hondo just looks around like, "Yeah, but you're still outnumbered."
Welcome to Florum. Lose your flashy sword? Are these what you were looking for, Jedi?
I am more powerful than any Jedi. Know that you are dealing with a Sith Lord.
You're still outnumbered.
Dave Filoni even talked about it too in the featurette for this episode. He felt that Dooku could take down a bunch of them, but at the end, like, eventually he would get shot and die. And I think the best example of this as well, right? Like, look at Attack of the Clones. How did Dooku defeat the Jedi there? With sheer numbers. Are Jedi superior to battle droids? Yeah, absolutely. But when you got like 1,000 battle droids surrounding all of them, and they just keep coming because they can keep producing them, it's like, okay, eventually the Jedi are going to get wiped out. And that's what would have happened had the clones not arrived. It's also a big episode for Anakin and Obi-Wan as well, because, you know, we see a lot of them together. The last time that we saw the two of them together for an episode would have been Destroy Malevolence. Like, when I say together, I mean like in action. And here it's like they're trying to survive against a Gundark, which Gundarks, by the way, like, the first time that we ever heard a reference of a Gundark would have been Empire Strikes Back. Like, I remember Han Solo had that line.
He looks strong enough to pull ears off a Gundar.
But one of the things that I love about this show, and I think they do this multiple times, is like they'll just take these obscure, like, throwaway lines from stuff, and they'll use it in Clone Wars. George probably sitting there in a meeting like, oh yeah, we had that one reference about a Gundark. Let's put a Gundark in there. We'll have him chase the Chosen One around. But Anakin and Obi-Wan, like, would have died in this episode had it not been for Ahsoka, because Ahsoka is able to arrive in time with, like, some troopers. Like, they blow up all the rocks that are blocking the way so they can get out. But, like, crucially, there was a bunch of poison gas in there, right? That was gonna poison and kill Anakin and Obi-Wan. But Anakin and Ahsoka kind of have like their little bantering back and forth too, and Obi-Wan just sitting there like, oh no, I'm enjoying this far too much. Cause like Obi-Wan knows what it's like him and Anakin used to have that banter back and forth all the time, and they sometimes still do. So for him, it's like, now I get to watch him go through it. And then we get the negotiation scene from Hondo, where it's like, all right, if you want the Sith Lord, it will cost you 1,000,000 credits. And there's a bunch of people at this meeting as well. We had Chancellor Palpatine, because of course, we had Yoda, Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Padme, and Jar Jar. What an assortment of characters this is. Now, the deal was that it would be 1,000,000 credits in an unarmed diplomatic ship. Hondo shows Dooku on screen, and Dooku's like covering his face, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, Palpatine's gonna be so mad the next time he sees him. He was probably like super pissed off in that moment, like, how the F did this happen? And Palpatine's sitting there like, well, you know, a hologram might be fake. And Hondo's like, oh, you want proof? Here's his lightsaber. And like Palpatine's sitting there like, this proves nothing. And, you know, Hondo's like, all right, well, I'm sure the Separatist Council will be more than willing to accept my price. Mace Windu kind of like sits up in his chair in that moment. Like, he's probably sitting there thinking like, all right, we need to, Chancellor, do something. But then the funny part was, it was actually Padme who kind of like goes up to him and is like, we may never have a better chance to capture Count Dooku. And then Padme's the one who takes the lead on this, even though like this is like the Chancellor of the Republic here. Like, Padme steps in and is like, we would like to send 2 Jedi to confirm that you have Dooku before we deliver the ransom. And Hondo's like, okay, that's fine, send your Jedi, but they have to be unarmed. Windu explains this to Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Anakin's like, unarmed? And I sit there, wait a minute, Anakin, but aren't you already unarmed? You don't have your lightsaber anymore, so why does this bother you? One of the things that always stood out to me watching this episode, even at like 8 years old, was the music when they walk into the pirate bar. It was like this Indian pop music, but one of the reasons why it stood out to me is because like I had relatives like in my family that were from India, and I'd listened to that style of music before. So like, it was just kind of one of those things where I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Because usually like whenever I see Star Wars music nowadays, right, like they're kind of coming up with their own style of music, which is cool. But to like take from other cultures and stuff, like that was like interesting to me. I really liked that. Because like the moment I heard the music, it like clicked with me. So yeah, it was just like a small thing. Like it only happened for like 5 seconds. I mean, you can kind of hear the music in the background the whole time, but it's kind of like overshadowed by Hondo talking with Anakin and Obi-Wan. And then you kind of hear it at the end of the episode when they're all sitting there having drinks. But again, something that I really enjoyed. I love it when Hondo's talking with him and he's like, even a Sith Lord is no match for my warriors. And then it cuts to like a bunch of people just like sitting at the bar all passed out from probably drinking too much. It's great. I like the conversation between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Dooku when Dooku's locked up in the cell and Dooku's sitting there like, look, if you guys must be absolute idiots to think that these pirates aren't going to turn their backs on you. It is one of those things that you sit there throughout the episode thinking, like, are the pirates going to turn their backs on the Jedi? Like, they made them arrive unarmed. Like, who says they're not going to do anything to them too? And even afterward, like, Obi-Wan's like, I am worried about these pirates, Anakin. Anakin's sitting there like, they don't want to mess with Jedi. They're just looking for a quick score. I love how Dooku's like, they are devious and most importantly, stupid. And Obi-Wan's like, oh, it's no wonder you don't get along with them, Dooku. You have so much in common. So they report back to the Chancellor, and he's like, all right, good. We will send Senator Karras and Representative Binks to be dispatched immediately. Now, okay, the first thing I have to say, like the first time watching this episode, going back to me being at 8 years old again, and I remember sitting there like, okay, why are they sending Jar Jar on this mission? Like, surely there is someone else in the Senate that is more qualified to handle this than Jar Jar. And this is coming from someone who, again, loves Jar Jar, but understands what his purpose is. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, you know what? They did have Ahsoka go off with Luminara a couple episodes ago, and I remember sitting there thinking, like, oh, maybe this is a chance for a Jedi, like a Padawan, to have interactions with another Jedi Master, go on a mission with them, and get experiences with someone else besides their own master. And I know that here, right, Jar Jar is, like, supposed to be a representative for Naboo, which means that he would work under Padme. So I sit there thinking, like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for Jar Jar to work under someone else and to get some more experience. Now, keep all of this in mind, because next episode, we're going to talk about the moment where it really clicked with me, where it went, oh, that's what they're doing. Little tease for next week, so stay tuned. But yeah, the final part of this episode is where they're switching drinks and stuff, right? Because Hondo's like, give our guests some refreshments. And then you see, like, one of the pirates, like, sprinkle a little something in the drinks, like, ooh, is he trying to drug them, trying to poison them? When they first get the drinks, Obi-Wan and Anakin, like, they just look at them, and it's they kind of know that something's up. This is how much I didn't pick up on this at 8 years old. I didn't realize that they had actually switched the drinks, because the way that they did it in animation was so smooth that, like, once you, like, obviously if you're really paying attention, you'll see it. But, like, for me at 8 years old, it's like goes so fast, like my eyes are spinning like, whoa, how did they do that? But I remember first time, like, why did you just drink that? You knew something was wrong. Why are you drinking it? And then not realizing, oh yeah, they switched the drinks. Like, I think it was actually, like, whenever I watched the episode, because the way that it would always work when I was a kid is I'd watch the episode on Cartoon Network when it would air, because that would be on a Friday, right? Especially in the early days of Clone Wars, it would be like, I'd watch the episode on Friday, and then whenever I would get picked up from school on Monday from my grandfather, we would watch it with him. And if I remember correctly, I think he was the one who pointed out to me that they had swapped the drinks. Which is funny, because I remember seeing a trailer for the next episode of, like, Obi-Wan and Anakin being captured, and I'm like, well, that's your fault. And then when I watched it again and I saw them switch the drinks, I'm like, well, wait, how did they get them? Which then kind of led me to believe that Hondo would have drugged the other people's drinks as well, because he knew that the Jedi were going to try something. Which, if that's the case, smart thinking. Overall, you guys, I enjoyed this episode. I feel like growing up, I didn't enjoy this episode as much, and it's definitely one of, like, the lesser episodes of Clone Wars, in my opinion, but it gives us an introduction to Hondo. Hondo, I don't really, like, the first season that Hondo's in, these, like, first 2 episodes that he's in, I wasn't necessarily as into the character yet. It's not until we get the episode with him in season 2 where I really, like, that episode is, like, my favorite episode of season 2. I loved it. But not so much for just Hondo, but for all the elements in it as well. But, like, once we get to season 5, it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, okay, Hondo's, like, one of my favorite characters in this whole show. Yeah, you guys, I think that's all I've got to say about this episode this week. Next week, we're going to talk about the Gungan General, which is part 2 to this Count Dooku gets captured arc. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of this episode. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know your thoughts. That's gonna wrap us up for today, you guys. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others to help support the channel, and I will see you guys next time.
When you're a Jedi Master, you can make the plan.
That's just it. How can I become a Jedi Master if I'm always getting caught?
At least you're a master at getting caught.